Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. For our attendees and viewers, so you know that you tuned in to the right place, either on Zoom or PACC-DC's Facebook Live, we will be interviewing our special guest, Philippine Ambassador Romualdez, on Philippine-U.S. relations in a time of change, hosted by the Philippine-American Chamber of Commerce of Metro Washington, D.C., or PACC-DC for short. I'd like to call on PACC-DC President Christina Sison of Compass Season Homes to welcome you all. Christina?
Hello to everyone. Welcome to our informative talk with Philippine Ambassador Romualdez. PACC has many events like this, and if you're interested to join a dynamic group like ours, please check our Facebook page, our website at www.pacc-dc.org, or reach out to any of our officers and members. Our goal is to really unite and elevate the Philippine-American business interest here in the Metro DC area, and for us to get to know each other, unite. Is it in unity that we are actually a strong force, and thereby enhancing the Filipino-American heritage and presence in the community? So again, welcome and thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you, Christina. I believe the membership is free, isn't it, for 2020 for the PACC-DC? So yes, please join PACC-DC before the end of the year. It's first year is free.
Yes, in line with COVID-19, we recognize this is a great time for us to, get to know each other, and membership is free for a year. And please come and just register, and we'll be happy to have you. Thank you.
Great. And now let me take this opportunity to thank our sponsors and call on them to give us a few words. First, we have Mr. Mitchell Myers, Corporate Account Manager of KAJI Pacific. Hello, Mitch.
Hello, Olma. Thank you. And a warm greetings to all of the PACC membership. It's great to be a sponsor today. And again, on behalf of KAJI Pacific, we really would like to support the Philippine-American Chamber of Commerce. And again, all of the membership out there, the business owners. And again, just a few points I'd like to just kind of bring to your attention. As you all know, that aviation has been a very challenging period during the last 6-7 months or so. For KAJI Pacific, it's been that way as well. And I feel bad you haven't had a chance to be on a flight recently, but just wanted to let you know that even though our flights from Washington are currently suspended, if you do want to go back home, you can, and that is going to be via JFK, LA, San Francisco. So there are some ways to get back. Again, just transiting via Hong Kong, again, just make sure that your transit time is less than 24 hours. And again, your itinerary is on one ticket. Again, relatively easy to do. And again, I would really recommend that you check our website or the Philippine Embassy website for your entry restrictions. That's very important to know. Also, and one last point, and again, this is very important when you're traveling, and we realize that health protocols are very much of a concern right now with the pandemic. Please wanted to let you know that KAJI Pacific is going by the WHO standards. In other words, we are doing all deep cleaning on our aircraft at various points during the journey. All of our flight attendants wear masks and gloves. And again, we do require passengers to wear a mask if they're not eating or drinking. And again, that's something that's very important to keep in mind. Also, just to go back to the tickets, if you do want to buy a ticket and if you purchase it before December 31st, any changes are complimentary or free up to 1 year. And again, there might be some differences in fare, but as far as fare fees, those have been waived. So again, you might want to look at perhaps doing that. That way it gives you some flexibility. Before I let you go, I'm just going to set up the video. I'm going to have Christoph run it, but it's going to show you exactly what we're doing on board the aircraft. And again, we take health very seriously when you're on board a KAJI Pacific aircraft. And I think you'll enjoy it regarding our air filtration systems on our 777 and A350 aircraft. So without further ado, thank you again. And Christoph, I'll have you run that video.
The air conditioning system in every one of our aircraft is equipped with HEPA filters, which have a similar performance to those used in hospital operating rooms. The cabin air refreshes every 2 to 3 minutes. Together with a triple defense barrier, the air conditioning system can filter up to 99.99% of airborne particles. The movement of air also plays an important role. The filtered air does not flow between passengers. It flows vertically from ceiling to the cabin floor before exhausting out from the cabin.
Just to kind of briefly just touch about a few things. Again, we use a HEPA grade air filter, which is what they use in hospitals. It removes 99.9% of the particulates in the air. So very safe and and it's a very hygienic environment that we're in. Again, thank you very much. And Olma, I'll turn it back to you.
As I said, Mitch, before, and I'm saying it again, I'm flying Cathay Pacific for sure next time I go back to the Philippines.
Well, it's great to have, we'd love to have you on board. And again, hopefully in the next few months, things will get better. And again, we look forward to better 2021. And please feel free to reach out to me for anything. And again, we're proud to be a sponsor of the PACC-DC event today. And again, thank you again.
Okay. All right, we also have Joseph Arzadon, DDS, MD, Diplomates, American Board of Oral and Maxillofacial Surgery, Fellows, American Association of Oral and Maxillofacial Surgeons, Fellow, American Academy of Cosmetic Surgery, President and owner of Northern Virginia Surgical Arts. Dr. Joe, take it away.
Thank you, Olma. And again, thank you, PACC, for hosting this event. Thank you, Ambassador Romualdez, for participating. We're happy to and proud to be sponsors of the PACC. As you know, I'm Joe Arzadon. I'm the president of Northern Virginia Surgical Arts. And our sister organization, our sister clinic, is called the Spa Clinic. We do our specialties in oral and maxillofacial surgery, as well as facial cosmetic surgery and other aesthetic procedures. I'm joined by Dr. David Liang and Dr. Kenneth Blaze. And what we do is we actually do anything from something as like taking out wisdom teeth, to placing dental implants, to doing facial reconstruction, trauma, to facial cosmetic surgery, pathology, basically a lot of things that deal with the head and neck area. We are as far as the cosmetic surgery, we do facelifts, rhinoplasty, eyelid surgeries. I know this is there's a lot of things going on right now, and believe it or not, we've been seeing patients come in just to kind of feel normal again, and coming in for whatever they need to do. And they also come in now because they have a lot more time to spare. As you know, living in Northern Virginia, we don't really have a lot of time for ourselves. But one of the things that happened with the COVID is that people actually come in and have more time. Just like any of the medical practices, you know, we are, and also a lot of the dental practices, we do abide by the strict PPEs, and any patient who comes in are asked and questions about their exposures and screened. So just so you know, it's safe to go to doctor's offices. If you're sick, please go in. Of course, now you can also have virtual exams and virtual consults. But as a surgeon, obviously we have to see the patients. It is safe to see doctors. We do have 4 offices: Arlington, Gainesville, Manassas Park, and Warrenton. And we'll be getting a 5th office soon in Manassas as well. And they're all in Northern Virginia area. If you'd like to know more about us, our website is novasurgicalarts.com, and you can certainly find more about what we do. And one of the things I really miss is doing, I'm very active in medical admissions. I'm also the president of Medical Admission of Mercy USA. We unfortunately, because of COVID, we have to cancel our mission in February 2021. And we were fortunate to be able to do a mission in 2020 in the Philippines, but we had to cancel our Guatemala June mission because of the COVID. So hopefully this will get better soon. Again, thank you for listening to me, and as always, remain safe. Thank you.
Thank you and congratulations on your new clinic, Dr. Joe. Good luck on your MMOM charity organization. And last but not the least, we have the Omni Group, LLC.
The Omni Group LLC is a Virginia-based business and legal consulting group. We offer contract drafting and review, corporate governance, and estate planning services. Furthermore, we are affiliated with Legal Shield, a prepaid legal plan service in ID Shield, an identity protection service. We also offer life and health coaching services through our coaching programs under the banner, The Forked Road Principle. We understand that things happen, life happens, and now we have this pandemic with the social distancing, the quarantines, the prolonged isolation, and continuing health threats. Please reach out to us. We are here to help. Last but not least, we are proudly affiliated with companies based in the Philippines, notably the Inocentes Canonizado and Associates Law Office, a law firm in Quezon City, the Inocentes Realty and Sales Corporation, and the Glorious Sun Agricultural Development Corporation, both of which are real estate related companies. So if you or someone you know are in need of legal services or are in the market to buy properties in the Philippines, please contact us. For more information and to get in touch, please visit our website at omligroup.com.
Great. Again, thank you to our sponsors. And now please allow me to give you all a quick rundown on the proceedings. This is in interview format, so we will be asking the ambassador questions on specific areas of Philippine-U.S. relations. Attendees and viewers are welcome to type in your questions either in the chat or Q&A box on the Zoom screen or on the comment section on PACC-DC Facebook Live. And I'm sure everyone's ready to hear from our guest speaker. Let me go ahead and introduce our distinguished guest. Jose Manuel Babe del Gallego Romualdez was appointed Ambassador of the Republic of the Philippines to the United States of America in July 2017 by President Duterte and formally assumed office in November 2017. Prior to his appointment, Ambassador Romualdez was previously designated as a special envoy of the Philippine President to the United States. He has extensive experience as a media practitioner and business executive, and writes columns for the Philippine Star with a wide following of readers both in the Philippines and abroad. It's our honor and pleasure to have him with us tonight to speak about Philippine-U.S. relations in a time of change. Welcome, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you very much for inviting me to your webinar on PACC-DC, and I also would like to greet our good friend Christina and the rest of your members. And I just wanted to ask your sponsor, Mitch, when are you going to have your flights from Washington to Hong Kong and Manila? That's one of my favorite flights that I take usually when I go back. And I'm looking forward to going back right after this pandemic is over. It's the best way to get to Manila, actually. But anyway, thank you again for inviting me. And I'm very happy to be able to talk to your members and to all of you about our relationship with the United States, especially with the incoming new administration here. And we've had quite a number of webinars, and I've spoken to a number of groups and forums, and the interest on what we can expect from the new administration here in Washington, D.C. and our relationship with the United States is very much in their minds. So I'll be very happy to just answer any of your questions, and I'm ready. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for gracing us. But let me give you a brief background, because many of our viewers may not know the history between the Philippines and the U.S. It's quite a long history together, starting in 1898, when the Philippines became an American colony after Spain ceded the Philippines to the U.S. at the end of the Spanish-American War. This lasted until July 1946, when President Truman recognized the Philippines as an independent state. Since then, Philippine-U.S. relations have become deeply entrenched, covering historical, cultural, diplomatic, and economic ties, and areas of cooperation and assistance in the fields of education, health, human rights, regional security, disaster relief and recovery, among other things. That's why we have a lot of ground to cover in this interview. So let's go right on to our first question. Mr. Ambassador, next year, 2021, will see 75 years of official Philippine-U.S. relations. How would you describe this relationship?
Well, I think it's always been a very strong one. As you know, we have a lot of Filipino-Americans living here in the United States. Filipinos, we're close to 4.5 million strong here in the United States. So that affinity is very strong. The people-to-people relationship has been continuously strong. And now more than ever, we have a lot of Filipinos who are in high places in government here in the United States. But of course, we've had some issues every now and then, but most of that have been resolved or are being addressed. We continue to interact with many members of the U.S. Congress here and people here in Washington, D.C., the think tanks, and we continue to find ways and means to have a strong relationship here, not only in the political side or the military side, but the economic ties that we have. And I think that the PACC could very well play a major role in strengthening the economic ties that we have. You know that the ASEAN region is going to be the next, I would say, the next boom economy or powerhouse economy in the world. We are about close to 700 million people. And the recent signing of the RCEP, which is the Regional Comprehensive Economic Package between the ASEAN countries, is a good example of how that region is going to be really a place for many American companies and or even Filipino-American companies here in the United States to look into the Philippines as a good destination point for investments. So I'm very confident that 75 years will be just another milestone in the relationship that we've had with this country.
Good. That sounds good. But under the current administrations in both countries, and taking into consideration the U.S. presidential elections just passed and the 2022 upcoming Philippine presidential elections, do you see any developments, derailments, improvements, or any change at all in Philippine-U.S. relations in the next 4 years?
Well, I think we've had good relations with both Democrats and Republicans. Both parties here in the United States have different views on how they conduct their foreign policy. But at the end of the day, I think the kind of allies that we have been with the United States has remained the same and even stronger than ever. As I said, you know, it's a relationship that sometimes there's a little bit of not really hate. That it's not a love-hate relationship, but it's a relationship that sometimes can get a little sour to a certain extent because of certain issues. But I think at the end of the day, again, it is important that we mutually respect each other. The Philippines, while we are close to the United States, we want to be able to have an independent foreign policy where we are friends to all and enemies to none. We all know that there is a very strong contender now for influence in Asia. I'm specifically referring to China, but they are our neighbors and we have no choice but to deal with them like most countries in the world. And even if there is this very strong whiplash on the pandemic, all countries have to work together. And China, which is a very big country with 1.2 billion people, unless it also has to be, as they say, as healthy as the world. So everyone has to work together that something like this, the pandemic, will not happen again. So these are the realities of what's happening in the world today. And I think that in the end, our relationship will remain strong with a country like the United States, and we're strengthening our relationship with all our neighbors in the Asian region.
continuing on that note, what are your priorities in your diplomatic role as the Philippine ambassador to the US? And how do you plan to work the capital, with Congress, White House, business leaders to advance these priorities?
Well, for one thing is obviously in the past 3 years, we've developed relationships with the Trump administration and the people around the Republicans specifically, but obviously the change in administration will require us to start working our way into those that are going to be in the administration of President-elect Biden. We've had a number of interactions with many of the Democrats in the past, and we will just continue with that. And we've already made contact with many of the advisors of President-elect Biden, specifically those that are going to be involved in foreign policy. So it is just a question of really having a communication line that we will continue to interact with them and give them the priorities that the Philippines has as far as a relationship with this country. And as I said, the people to people is one aspect that we will always sort of like use as the basis for this special relationship that we have with this country. And as I said, economic ties is also very important for us right now. Our country is poised to really have an economic takeoff. Even with the pandemic, our economy remains very strong, and many of our economic managers are convinced that this pandemic may have a little bit of a bump in our economy, but our infrastructure program, a massive infrastructure program that was launched 2 years ago, is continuing, and we will continue to do so until the end of the term of President Duterte and beyond. So there will be a lot of opportunities for American companies specifically to look into the Philippines as their pathway to Asia, as it becomes the new economic powerhouse in the world.
You've mentioned the pandemic situation a couple of times already, Mr. Ambassador. And turning to that specifically, would you kindly provide an update on the contributions of our Filipino and Phil-Am health workers as frontliners and the continuing challenges that they face?
Well, I can tell you that we have had, I would say, some very unfortunate stories about many of our frontliners who have suffered not only casualties, but also we've been working with some of the associations here in the United States to try and talk to the authorities in their state to help our frontliners who have been working almost 24/7, and they just want to have the support that they need from many of the states. But overall, our Filipino frontliners here in the United States are very much appreciated. We all know that Filipino-Americans, and like I said, that is one of the lucky things about being here in the United States, is that I don't really have to explain the kind of people we are, because I'm very proud to be the ambassador here for all Filipinos and Filipino-Americans, because the image that we have is just unbelievable. Many other countries that have people here are envious because of the fact that we do have a lot of good people here, good workers. They're very much appreciated by the communities. We have a lot of Filipino-Americans who are in high positions or in positions in government and also in private entities. All that contributes to the fact that we are a very much appreciated race, and I'm very proud to be part of that, like most of you, I'm sure, are.
Yes, our hearts and support go to our frontliners. But turning to Philippine-U.S. relations in this pandemic situation, has it been affected? What challenges have been encountered, and how were those challenges met?
What could you expand on that? What do you mean by affected by?
The Philippine-U.S. relations, has there been any challenges with regard to the pandemic situation?
Well, I think one thing for sure is that we are getting a lot of assistance from the United States when it comes to the pandemic. They were one of the first to, particularly the USAID and many of the other institutions here in the United States, that because of our relationship, they have come forward and and giving us all the necessary aid. But foremost of which is that as early as April, we have already asked the United States government, specifically the White House, to help us have access to the vaccines. And now we know that there are two leading pharmaceutical companies that are ready to roll out or distribute these vaccines. One of them is Pfizer, and Pfizer has been in the Philippines for more than 70 years, and it's a company that's been around for 170 plus years. So the country manager has been interacting with many of our health officials, and we're ready to procure many of these vaccines that we badly need. So again, that special relationship that we have with the United States continues to bear fruit, so to speak, because we are being given an opportunity by the U.S. government to have access to these vaccines at reasonable prices, so to speak. And like many other countries, the vaccine, of course, is the most important tool that we have to try and fight this pandemic. So the effect of this pandemic is that we now know where we can turn to as friends, in the United States is definitely one of them.
Yes, and since we all know that the pandemic is an international challenge, you know, countries like us, our Philippines, we look for international solutions, and comparing any U.S. expectations for support with the others like China, Russia, the EU, and the WHO, how would they compare?
Well, you know, like I said, again, because of the relationships that we're trying to develop with all countries all over the world, and specifically Russia and China, they have come forward to and offered us their vaccines. But you know, not that there's any real discrimination, but many Filipinos are still would rather have Western vaccines. Nobody can deny that fact. But like I said, all countries all over the world have to help each other, and no one country can really simply isolate another country, because we live in a global village, and certainly we need to have at least 70% of the world's population to be immune from this scourge, this pandemic, and the sooner we have that, the better for all of us. So certainly, all countries have to band together, whether they're friend or foe, so that we can move forward and move on with our lives and be able to bring back the losses that we've had, not only the losses of lives, but also the losses of the jobs. And you know, we're very much affected by that. As you know, we have close to 11 million to 12 million overseas workers, and many of them we had to send back to the Philippines, or had gone back to the Philippines. Specifically here in the United States, we brought back as many as 4,000 to 5,000, and we also have a lot of seafarers, close to 80,000 that were in the cruise lines. All of them have hopefully temporarily lost their jobs, and the sooner they get back to their jobs, it will be much better for all of us, especially in the Philippines.
Absolutely. And then turning into the economic and business front, Mr. Ambassador, American companies have had a long-standing presence in the Philippines, and today's digital economy has attracted new players, as we all know, especially in the business processing outsourcing, or BPO sector. What other sectors do you think would be attractive to US investors? And what is the Philippines doing to attract those companies that are diversifying supply chains from China?
Well, one of our showcases, so to speak, is the the new Clark City. It is a fully developed city now. It's a green city. That is our showcase, and we've had a lot of forums where we show our Clark City and how it's been developed. The airport there is ready for operation. I think it's going to be in full operation by early next year. A full international airport. We have FedEx that has moved their operations in Clark. We have other companies from the United States that are looking at it. We're inviting many of the other supply chains as far as medical supplies are concerned. I know that there are quite a number of American companies that are being encouraged by the US government to move to other parts in Asia and not be dependent on China, as they learned that it could become a problem. So we're open to a lot of that investment right now. And mind you, we have a lot of inquiries, and some of them have already indicated that they will be they'll start to move, and we're giving them as much incentives as we can. And of course, the technology, as we all know now, so we're building more towers. We have KKR, which is an American company that builds towers for cell sites and for other technological requirements. We're building as many as 50,000 towers all over the country as part of our infrastructure, so that we will be all interconnected. So there'll be a lot of opportunities, and I think that next year, hopefully when this pandemic is over, we are going to invite several American companies, and perhaps we can invite some of your members if they wish to join for a mission where you can see the development that's being done in the Philippines today.
You mentioned infrastructure, and we know of President Duterte's focus on that. Is that a continuing focus? Will there still be that much focus on infrastructure in the future?
Yes, as a matter of fact, it hasn't really stopped at all. In fact, that's one of the things that we had to continue in spite of the pandemic. We took all the safety measures that needed to be taken. The government has committed close to $80 billion US dollars into the economic or the infrastructure program, what we call the Build infrastructure program of the government. We're building more airports all over the country, and we hopefully can connect from north to south. You can now go by car without having to go through a ferry boat or whatever it is to cross to go to any of the 7,000 plus islands that we have. This hopefully will be done in about maximum of 10 years. We've already finished many of the infrastructure, the priority projects in Metro Manila with a joint venture with private companies like San Miguel Corporation that has just finished the connection between north and the south expressway. All of this is all being done at the same time. We also have the subway system that hopefully will be ready for operation. At least the first phase of it will be ready for operation by the end of next year. There are many of those projects that are ongoing and will continue, not only because we're committed to it, but we have already had the financing that has been put in place. So it's all set. In other words, whether or not come hell or high water, so to speak, it will go on, and hopefully will be taken over by the next administration in 2022, where we will finish everything by I think the estimate is about 2027 or 28.
Wow, that's a lot of improvement, and I'm very excited to see that myself. Yeah, with the current U.S. administration's focus on America first and manufacturing locally in the U.S., so we're turning to this our side of the ocean. Assuming this focus continues on manufacturing locally, how can the Philippines benefit and explore opportunities in the U.S. market?
Well, American First is obviously something that the United States needed to do somehow because many of the jobs here were lost because it's much cheaper for them to produce many of the things that they need. But there are still opportunities, I think. You mentioned BPOs and you mentioned other areas where we can still cooperate. And there are many, there are many parts, so to speak, about even automobiles that are still being produced outside of the United States and then brought here to the US for the finishing product. So I think that we're exploring all that. And as I said, we have a lot of economic zones that we're developing in the Philippines, not only in Clark, but in many parts of the city of the Philippines, in the South specifically, where development is still very open. All that hopefully will attract some of these companies to, I would say, subcontract some of these projects or some of these stuff that can be produced by other countries like the Philippines.
Okay. For the academicians and students in our viewers, what would you encourage happen in the area of educational cooperation between the two countries that's not already existing?
Well, I think that we, when I went to Arizona late last year, we spoke to Arizona University as an example. Arizona University has a lot of virtual, and this is before even this pandemic, that they did a lot of virtual classes already that was being developed, and they do have that. So we put them together with a private school in the Philippines, National University, which is owned by the Henry C. family. And I think that that's ongoing right now. They have exchange programs where the virtual education of some of these students on certain courses are being done now between Arizona State University and National University. I think there are many other universities in the Philippines that are also looking into that one, especially some of the schools that I went to, like Ateneo University. They are trying to develop also that sort. So the world is changing very. One of the silver lining, not that it's really a silver lining because of the pandemic, but we're all now communicating through the internet, and I think that education will be much more improved in terms of being able to have students have an interaction with universities here in the United States and also vice versa. So that I think will take place faster, and hopefully it will make it easier for many of our students who would like to have some kind of education here. They don't have to really travel all the way to the United States to have it, although of course it's more exciting to have a personal type of education. But to a certain extent, it'll be exciting that we will have this virtual type of interaction between universities, like what we are experimenting with Arizona University and National University.
That's great. And I think it would be good timing to say or mention that we do have the longest running Fulbright program in the world. I didn't even know that.
That's right. Yes, correct. There are many Fulbright exchange students. Some of them as far back as 30 or 40 years ago, they've been Fulbright scholars. So I've attended some of these alumni Fulbright scholarship, and not only here in Washington, but also in the Philippines. And I was surprised myself. It's been around for a long time.
Yes. And I've heard, turning to consular matters, there's been some concern, or I guess some activity, a lot of activity in the dual citizenship applications. Would you like to say something about that? With the holidays coming up, of course, everybody's concerned.
Well, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we obviously had to put in place safety measures that was put in by our task force that's in charge of the overall way to manage and control the pandemic from spreading. So we had to put no citizen now can travel to the Philippines without a visa. And that is the way of being able to control them coming in, unless they are expats or diplomats. We discourage tourists from coming into the Philippines for now, until such time that we see that the pandemic is reaching. As you know, here in the United States, obviously it's going up. So all the more we're a little bit concerned about Americans traveling to the Philippines. But there is one loophole. If you're a Filipino citizen, obviously you can go home to the Philippines. So we have a lot of Philams here who have not taken the dual citizenship part of it. So there's been a deluge of so many applications for Philams to go around that rule. Unfortunately, we are also in a situation where we are not fully operational, not only here in Washington, but in many of our consulates. So we have thousands of people, literally hundreds of thousands of Filipinos who are now scrambling to get this dual citizenship and the passport so that they can travel to the Philippines. While we welcome it to a certain extent, we also are cautioning them that it's perhaps better to just wait a little while. We just have to be careful, not only for themselves, but also for the Filipinos. We should try to postpone all of these trips that you have planned out for now until things get a little better. And then there is already light at the end of the tunnel. As soon as this vaccine is out, I'm sure here in the United States, all of you will be able to get the vaccine fairly quickly than most countries. And so it's best to just postpone this. But if you still want to have your dual citizenship, we will continue to process them. But it will take time. Right now, from what I understand, the waiting time is all the way up to January already because of the number of applicants that we have in all our consulates. And you'll have to bear with us because not only do we have to, we're not fully operational, but we're technically unmanned right now because it's also the time of the year that there's a lot of changes. As you know, the diplomatic service requires that only 3 to 4 years of service here, and then they move back to the home office. So all these changes are taking place all at the same time. And also we have to be following the state rules on how many people can go to work and move around, especially our New York office right now and our Houston consulate.
Yes, and that is pretty understandable. We do stand behind the embassy on that score because we understand how hard it is. It's, with the coming holidays, us Filipinos, we always love to go home for the holidays, for Christmas, spend with our family, but it is a community effort. So we do ask that everyone be patient and just postpone your travel for now.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Ambassador, in the areas of cooperation between the Philippines and U.S., specifically human and drug trafficking, counterterrorism, human rights, climate change, and disaster relief and recovery, what can the Philippines and U.S. do bilaterally, not only to respond after the fact, but also to enhance resiliency and timely response?
Well, for one, we have been working already very closely with the United States on counterterrorism. We've had a lot of intelligence sharing, and that continues. We do have a lot of our military and our police attachés here in Washington, D.C., and also in the West Coast. As you know, the Marawi incident is a clear example of how terrorism and drugs are related. That was an accidental operation that was conducted by our police force in Marawi, where it was supposed to be a drug raid that turned out to be a raid on a particular safe house of ISIS-leading terrorists. They had a lot of cash which came from drugs. And all of these were to buy many of the high-powered arms and grenade launchers and so forth and so on. So it turned out to be a major, what we call now the Marawi War, because we were fighting a very strong ISIS-leaning terrorist groups in that part, and they're still actually they've spread out into many parts of Mindanao or parts of Mindanao, and we shared a lot of information. The United States was very helpful in being able to for us to work with them in counter-terrorism activities. Now, for drugs, I know that this is an issue that's been ongoing, and this is not the first time that we've had this. But you know, like here in the United States, drugs is a major problem, and a lot of it is coming from other parts of the world. So we have to continue to cooperate on this one, and the war on drugs is not a joke. President Duterte launched this, and I myself, I have been a critic of the government in the past on how we have not been able to control the drug situation in the Philippines. And I didn't realize how bad it was until I saw many, not only our police forces, but also local officials, as far as up to a mayor that was actually involved in this drug. So it is something that is very serious, and the United States has to see that we have to band together in getting rid of this, because the Philippines, while we are a strong ally and we have strong relationships here, it can be a transshipment point, like what happened at one point in Thailand. The Prime Minister there at that time, Thaksin, was also involved in going after the drug situation there, which was very bad. So all that is interrelated, and we have to cooperate fully and trying to. It's very hard to get rid of it completely, but definitely we have to cooperate in controlling it so that it's done to the barest minimum that will not affect many lives. And we've seen it. I have seen it personally, and many people whose families were completely destroyed because of drugs. And it's even more prolific in the Philippines because, as you know, many of the victims are overseas workers whose parents are out of the country, working and sacrificing, only to find out that their children have been involved in drugs. So that all that money that they are saving only goes to the drugs. So it's really heartbreaking to see all of this happen. And so both the United States and the Philippines have to understand that this is something that we need to work together and try to manage it. And many countries have been successful to a certain extent. As you know, in Malaysia, it's a zero tolerance. And in China, zero tolerance, and also in Malaysia. The Philippines is just trying its best to do something about it, and we're trying. Our Congress is trying to pass a bill now to have the death sentence to be meted out to anyone who's involved in drugs. So it's a big problem, and we all have to work together to try and control this scourge.
That's true. I myself have been witness to the destruction that the drug industry, the drug use in the Philippines when I was a prosecutor back then. And it's really, as you said, heartbreaking.
Yes, it is, absolutely. I've seen even some of my friends whose children were involved in it or taking drugs, and it's just it's like it's a different world altogether, really. It's a very serious problem, and you know, it's very easy to say and talk about human rights, but when you see many of these drug pushers and drug lords, so to speak, they have no mercy. They just go ahead and do what they can. in spite of the fact that destroying even young children, they even use young children to get involved in distributing this drugs. And you know, it's so easy to get many of these things now because of the fact that it is no longer grown, but it's a chemical. Like what is it? The methanoid and the shabu and all of these things.
True. And now let's turn to the Visiting Forces Agreement. It's been a long-standing agreement between the two countries, which was terminated by President Duterte earlier this year, but later he suspended the termination. What is the current status of this, and what does it mean for Philippine-U.S. relations in the areas of regional security and defense cooperation?
Well, I think we should just go back to the history of the Visiting Forces Agreement. It was actually signed in 1992 when we removed the bases, or actually it was right after the bases were removed from the Philippines. We felt that the Visiting Forces Agreement was an important agreement that we would have with the United States, our number one ally, to put teeth into the Mutual Defense Pact that we had. It was during the time of President Estrada, where this was ratified by our US Senate. But since then, there's been a lot of changes. And of course, the South China Sea situation has obviously been an issue that's been there since 1996, 97. And it just kept on getting worse as because of our beef with China and other claimants of the area. But you see, during the time of President Obama, we filed a case in the United Nations, the UNCLOS, where we won the arbitral award. The administration then of President Obama was not very supportive of that because at that time they felt that we needed, the United States wanted to have a good relationship with China, that the policy then was we do not get involved in territorial disputes. And some officials were even dismissing those reefs as just rocks anyway. Well, those rocks are now military bases. And many of our fishermen were not even allowed to fish there because the Chinese have taken a strong stand against our filing it in the United Nations. So it left us sort of like by ourselves because our ally, the United States, did not want to get involved, and we had to fend for ourselves as far as China is concerned. And so we felt that the Visiting Forces Agreement, what is it for? Is it for the Philippines or for the Mutual Defense Pact, or is it totally just for the U.S. alone? So that kind of started the arguments on why we should continue. And this did not come only from the administration of President Duterte, but many of our senators and congressmen were questioning the reason why we should continue with the BFA. And of course, this became even worse, and we had a lot of noise coming from here, specifically from the US Congress about the human rights issues and so forth and so on, which was felt by our government that it was really infringing into our sovereignty, that we were trying to do what was best for our country at that time. So that and many other issues led to the fact that the cancellation of the Visiting Forces Agreement was done by President Duterte. However, we have been able to save it, at least for now, because we have told our friends at the Pentagon and the Defense Department and also the White House that let's sit down and talk about how we can really help each other. And more specifically in strengthening our armed forces. As you know, if we are to really defend or be part of a mutual defense, we need to be able to contribute to that. It can't be a one-side thing. And the United States, as you know, can't be the policeman of the world, that they're everywhere. So we needed to be able to be able to defend ourselves, and if ever, and hopefully it will never come, we need to get together, like what happened in World War II. Then we are together, and that the Philippines will be able to contribute to that kind of defense arrangement that we have with the United States. That is what we're working on right now. And I think the visiting forces agreement would probably graduate into something like, let's strengthen both our relationships and strengthen our armed forces so that we will both be able to help in giving stability and peace in the area. And we're not only working with the United States, but we're also working with allies like Japan and Australia and other Asian countries that believe that the South China Sea should be stable and that there is a freedom of navigation, which all of us believe in.
That is a great segue to my next question that you mentioned, the South China Sea issue. You know, with China's focus on maritime expansion and, you know, the ongoing territorial disputes, specifically since China's blatant rejection of the 2016 ruling of the Permanent Court of Arbitration in our favor, or in the Philippines' favor, what other actions do you see that the U.S. can do in practical terms to help balance China's presence in the region, especially in light of U.S. Secretary of State Pompeo's statement that China's claims in the area are unlawful?
Well, I think that statement alone is enough to strengthen our win in the arbitral award, which makes us, and that's the reason why I think President Duterte in the beginning was being accused of being too soft, cozying up to China. But he has always said that we need to be able to talk to them because nobody else will find a way out of the situation except us, and that he was going to take up the arbitral award at the right time and at the right place. And the right time was when Secretary Pompeo declared the arbitral award to be lawful, and that China's moves in the South China Sea was totally unlawful. And so when President Duterte made a speech at the United Nations last September, he clearly stated about, he mentioned this, the arbitral award, and nobody can claim anything otherwise than that one. But at the same time, we still would like to be able, and everybody, including the United States, wants to find a peaceful solution to this. We welcome the freedom of navigation operations of the United States. They continue to do that right now in the South China Sea to balance the movements that are being made by China. But at some point, I think both countries will have to come to terms and really find a way out of this. I think with the new administration here coming in Washington, D.C., we will see some sort of a new policy that will see the light in really finding a solution, which is what we're trying to do with other ASEAN countries. The code of conduct that we are trying to sign up and have China agree to it. And that number one is that the freedom of the seas is clear, that all countries have a right to passage. And then slowly we'll be able to clear out on the territorial disputes. It's a long process, but that's what peace is all about. It can't come overnight. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Somebody has to give and somebody has to take. So that's the way we see it. And U.S. engagement is welcomed by all countries. They want to see China also behave in their movements, and we certainly hope that all of these moves that are being made by both countries will lead to the peaceful solution in the area.
I hope so, because Mr. Ambassador, I remember studying this when I was in college back in the 80s, and I know it's been going on since before that.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is really such a rich topic for discussion, and we'd love to hear more from you, Mr. Ambassador, but we're not going to totally monopolize your time, as we do have questions from our viewers. So if you don't mind, we'll jump right into the Q&A.
Sure.
So let's see, first question appears to be a two-part question. Mr. Ambassador, what are the challenges and efforts you have undertaken to promote Philippine interests in the U.S. Capitol. What do you think the different chambers, associations, business councils, and the like can do to help in this regard?
Well, as I said, the chambers could play a major role in having our economic ties even strengthened. You know, there's unfortunately there's really foreign direct investments coming from the United States is not as we want it to be. So we'd like to encourage more American companies and even Filipino-American companies. We have quite a number of them already flourishing here in the United States. To look at the Philippines, because you know we have a lot of competition from Vietnam and Thailand and Indonesia, and certainly you know the Philippines being a close ally of the United States is a big advantage in one way. We're an English-speaking country, and also you know many of us want to have the United States as our #1 trading partner, but right now Japan and China are coming in very strong. China, as a matter of fact, we've had a lot of investments coming from China now. While we welcome it, but we certainly don't want to be put our eggs in one basket, so to speak. So that's how many of the chambers can help. Now, in the question of what we're doing here, as I said, we've been interacting with a lot of people in government, but it's not a new ball game, but we just have to renew our friendships with many of those from the Democratic side and see how we can work together in continuing to have our relationship with this country remain strong. You know, one big advantage that the United States has to the Philippines is the fact that approval of Filipinos remains at a very high 85%. Filipinos believe and trust the United States as their #1 ally. So that kind of approval rating should be nurtured and taken care of, and that we here in Washington, D.C. would like to see many of our friends here continue to do what we can to strengthen that relationship and the trust that we have with the United States, that we will remain friends for a very long time, many lifetimes, so to speak.
Mr. Ambassador, second question. How do you think Phil-Am interests will fare under a Biden presidency?
Well, we do have a lot of Phil-Ams, especially in California. We all know that we have a number there who are very supportive of the Biden-Harris ticket. However, we do have some Phil-Am groups that are, you know, trying to throw a monkey's wrench in the relationship between the U.S. and the Philippines, egging perhaps some of their friends in the Democratic side to start putting the squeeze on the Philippine government under President Duterte. And I think that that kind of thinking is not really going to be helpful at all, because at the end of the day, our relationship with this country is good. But when you start going to another country to try and tell a government, a legitimate government that's been duly elected, we will never graduate from where we are. As I've always said, there was only one legitimate people power in the Philippines, and that was in 1986. The people power that happened in 2001 was totally illegitimate, because they overthrew a government, people supposedly, but it was an opposition-led overthrow of a duly elected president. And we will never strengthen our democratic institutions if we continue to come to the United States and always ask them to help or trying to put the squeeze or to cut down aid or whatever it is. And remember, nowadays, as I've always said, there are other countries that are now vying to become the dominant influential country in Asia. China obviously is very strong on that one. And we want to remain friends with everyone, but we want to remain also close to the United States. So Phil-Ams should just look at it that way. And no matter what, I always tell our friends here, our film friends, that you will always want to go back to the Philippines, no matter what. Even some of your children who have never seen the country, I know of many of them who are eager to find out about their roots. And so you want to see a country that will sort of like have the same kind of democratic institutions that you have here in the United States. And like I said, nothing is perfect. What's happening here right now is a prime example that there are situations where it's a little shaky in that sense, but at the end of the day, having a democratic institution or democratic institutions that are strong will what keep us together in the end.
Great. And 2021 marks 75 years of Philippine-U.S. relations. Are there any events planned by the embassy in celebration of this milestone?
Well, we're hoping that we can have really a big celebration, which we had to postpone. Last June, we were planning a big celebration here in Washington, D.C. with the participation of all our consulates and many of our films associations all over the United States. But we all know that that couldn't happen. So hopefully by June of next year, we will have that celebration that we planned. Perhaps so we can make it even bigger because it's 75 years of our relationship with the United States. July 4, of course, is what we call the Philippine-American Friendship Day. That is another occasion for us to have a big celebration of that relationship. All of this, of course, is dependent on how the pandemic is controlled, and we're all obviously optimistic that by middle of next year we should have sort of like a fairly normal life that we've all wanted to have again. And it's a reminder to all of us that we all live in a global village. All of us live in the same place in this world, and we have to take care of it, and we have to take care of each other.
Yes. Cross fingers and toes on the normalcy, return to normalcy.
I've had my toes crossed all the time.
So Ambassador, I am squinting here because the text is so small. Mr. Ambassador, has the Duterte administration recognized and congratulated President-elect Biden? Since many Philams have not yet accepted the election results, what is your message to the Philam community about this?
Well, you know, it's a standard procedure for all heads of state to congratulate the winner of the elections here. While there's an election protest that was filed by President Trump, that is, of course, an internal matter here in the United States. But President Duterte has sent a letter of congratulations to President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris. We recommended that we do that. And unless that election protest moves another way, we're ready to start the process of developing a relationship with the new administration on January 21st. And I would think that most Philams, you know, the dream of any ambassador is to see all Philam associations and communities be united. And I know that that's possible. And more, I'm sure it's going to be possible because we have a more, I would say that in the last 20 years or more that I've been coming here to the United States on a regular basis and coming here to Washington, as a matter of fact, and helping some of our friends in the political spectrum in the Philippines, I've seen more and more Philams are together and have the same united aspiration for unity. And that's why we have a lot of Philams that are now in places in government positions. And we'd like to see that. So if the Biden administration is going to take place, then I think Philippine-American should support the administration of President Biden because it is in their own interest and it is in the interest of the world that we have a country that, like the United States stable. That's really the only thing that I can say. Just like I always encourage people to respect the elections in the Philippines, I think we have to do the same here in the United States. Whatever the will of the people, that's what we should respect, no matter what.
Amen to that.
Mhm.
And that, folks, brings this interview to a close. I know we've gone a little bit over time. Thank you so much, Mr. Ambassador. I hope this is not the first and last time we will have you as a guest in our webinars.
I've always enjoyed talking to many of our friends in the Philippine-American community, especially PACC, and to you too, Olma, for
Thank
hosting.
you, sir.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
All right, before we go, we'd like to invite everyone to a leadership webinar that PACC-DC is hosting this coming Monday, November 23, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Resilience in a Changing World, Empowering Global Filipino Leaders. We partnered with Train Station, a leading motivational training and marketing agency in the Philippines, Singapore, and Hong Kong. The leadership webinar is sponsored by Enterprise Solutions, Inner Core Wellness, and the Spa Clinic. Also, we'd like to remind you that the Christmas Carol Singing Contest online Kantiktok sa Embahada is ongoing, culminating on December 13. This event is in partnership with the Philippine Embassy through the Philippine Overseas Labor Office or Polo WDC. Please visit Polo WDC's Facebook page for guidelines and procedure on how to join. Cash prizes are at stake. Again, thank you to our sponsors for this webinar with our Ambassador Romualdez, KAJI Pacific, Northern Virginia Surgical Arts, and the Omni Group LLC. I'd also like to give a shout out to Ms. Daryl Ann Artates, Second Secretary and Consul of the Philippine Embassy, for facilitating this webinar. Also to our tech support, Christoph Inocentes of KAJI Design Studio for PACC-DC, and Mark De La Vega for the Philippine Embassy. And of course, to our attendees and viewers, thank you for sticking with us. Magandang hapon sa inyong lahat.